Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, tonight playing the role of Jay Garrick for a brief amount of time because this head's heavy. And we are once again broadcasting from the Critical Blast Caverns. Tonight we are talking specifically about one of my favorite superheroes and one of my son's favorite superheroes, The Flash, which really needs to change because each one of them could be now called A Flash. But that's beside the point and getting way ahead of ourselves. Tonight our special guest is Mr. Bob Greenberger, who has recently put out a compendium of The Flash's 100 greatest moments. And we are going to explore the world of The Flash tonight. Bob, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fine, thanks, RJ. How about yourself?
You know, if I were doing any better, they might have to send me out for some drug testing. I was doing any happier. So The Flash, that's, I'm going to grab my copy of the book. I know you've got your copy. And my problem is, my Bob Greenberger collection is kind of
Weedy.
Do you think DC has a favorite, son?
Well, actually, it's not DC. The booksellers actually asked for the oversize, and I know that they went back to press for Justice League for that, and I do believe Batman debuted in that big size. I was a little surprised Flash didn't come out in that size. So, Chartwell Books does what the booksellers want because they want to sell copies. Well,
they do a great job. I mean, these are just in the physicality of the books themselves. They're well put together. They're not cheap by any stretch of the imagination.
Actually, it's reasonably priced.
I meant cheap in quality, not price. But yes, it's very.
No, yeah. I mean, nice paper, good reproduction. Every time a new book comes in, I'm really thrilled.
I love opening the envelopes and getting that new ink smell from a book fresh from the printer. So this is what I want to say your fifth 100 moments.
Yeah, I was contracted for 3. They sold well enough. They asked for 3 more. So this is number 5 of 6. Number 6 is kind of caught up in limbo because of the pandemic impacting both printers and booksellers alike. So maybe 2021, 22, we'll see.
Well, it's interesting that that these are the first 6 and they didn't, well, they got a Batman book, but that they didn't start with DC's flagship character, which of course is Superman.
They asked for Justice League for starters, and they came to me. They said, we're going to do Justice League and superheroes and supervillains. I said, okay. And then when it was time for the next 3, Batman was a given. And after that, there was some back and forth. I figured Superman and Wonder Woman would definitely get considered. They came to me with Flash because of the TV show. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely cool. And it's one of my favorite superhero TV shows out of the whole slew of them until this last year when Stargirl just rocketed right to the top because now it's a new favorite. I'm like, oh, they can make it look just like the comic books and not be cheesy about it. So,
well, it's hard to compare them because Stargirl was budgeted and ticketed for the DC Universe streaming service. So it was a different set of executives involved and different creators involved. I mean, the CW Universe, was growing far more organically with their limitations in, Canadian production and budgets and all. Flash came out on the CW and I thought, wow, a positive, uplifting superhero show, and it stopped being that after a season or 2.
Yeah, well, I'm going to continue watching the show. I love the show. I say this in love, but it's really become Iris West Allen and her amazingly fast friends. So when you get one of these contracts, and we'll just focus on the Flash for right now, how much access do you have to everything that's gone on? I mean, you get to touch some pretty amazing historical paper.
Okay, let me back up just a moment. I've been reading comics since 1964 because I'm old. And I've got one of those garbage memories that, retains all this arcane information about the characters, and then joined DC's Comics on staff in 1984. And between two different stints, I was on staff for 20 years. So I continued to steep myself in continuity and the backstories, as well as the corporate history and all. So I've got, one of the great operational institutional memories for the company. So when they came to me for these projects, a lot of it was already up here. Once I started, saying, all right, 100 Greatest Moments, Justice League. Oh yeah, this. It's like I started with immediately whatever bubbled up from memory, and then the research began. Same with the Flash, and from there, either I've got the books here in the house, or I do a lot of research via Comixology because it's all digital and I can just page through on screen and take notes. Wikipedia, the DC Wikia. There's Flash pages. So I definitely had a lot of good online resources. And then I've got my brain trust, John Wells, John Trumbull, and why am I blanking on the third name? Jim Beard. And they always help backstop me, reminding me of things or favorites of theirs. But for the Flash book, I also turned to Jeff Johns, Mark Guggenheim, Kerry Bates, and Mark Wade, because they know a thing or two about the Scarlet Speedster.
Yeah, just a few things here and there.
Jeff was so tied up with Stargirl, he wound up not having time to talk to me about it. So as a apology, he actually gave me a link to watch the pilot to Stargirl about 6 months before the CW aired it.
Ooh, nice.
So I knew it was going to be really good. But anyway, the Brain Trust came through, as did Keith Dallas. Keith did Tomorrow's Flash Companion book about 10, 12 years ago. So Keith, whatever I didn't think of, Keith did. And we came up with about 120 options, which I winnowed down and started organizing into different categories and proposed the list to DC. And they came back and said, it looks a little Silver Age heavy. So I did an analysis and showed them, 15% is the Golden Age, and this 22% is the Silver, whatever the percentages came out to be. And they said, oh, okay, never mind.
Well, I used to think that comics were getting rebooted way too often because especially as I got older, you know how time compresses the older you get. 20 years is like, I was just in high school yesterday. Like they're rebooting it every 20 years now. And then I stop and think, Showcase number 4 came out in what, 1960?
55.
55? That's way less than 20 years after Jay Garrick quit running.
Well, yeah. Well, the prevailing wisdom back in those days, the 40s and the 50s, even into the very early 60s, was that the comic book readership age was between 8 to 10 years old, and it turned over every 5 or 6 years. So they felt it was a whole new generation of potential readers when they decided to reboot The Flash. Later, in the 70s and 80s, actually, Julie Schwartz was of the opinion that the entire DC universe needed to be rebooted like the Silver Age about every 10 or 12 years.
Wow. Okay, well, 10 or 12 years might be a bit much, but, Julie's the guy who knew the business. We're just fans who say, don't start over, we're just getting good. But, yeah, you do have to and I want to emphasize for folks, this is not a this is not a chronology.
No, one of the first editorial decisions I made when this project came up was there was no way to properly rank 100 greatest moments over 60 years of the Justice League because the writing and art styles changed and evolved through time. What was important in the 1960s was different in the 70s than the 80s. So there was no fair ranking it. So I decided to go 100 moments categorized this way.
Exactly. And I was trying to get it. Yeah. And you've got like, 6 different chapters here. You got The Fastest Man Alive, which is, of course, all about the Flash as a person. The flashbacks, which I miss those. I learned so. I've told this story before, Bob, but I was getting the comic books, like I said, Sparta, Illinois. I was getting them from my barber when I was 4 years old.
Uh-huh.
I was able to read in kindergarten and nobody knew it because I didn't know that nobody else couldn't read. It was just what I was doing. So in first grade, I'm sitting here and the teacher's got one of these big placards up and she's reading real slowly to the class, follow the bouncing ball. I'm done. I'm like untying my shoe and retying my shoe because it's something I'm working on. And she stops and she's like, would you like to read to the class? And I didn't get sarcasm. I'm 5, I'm 6. So I looked up and I said, plants create energy through a process called photosynthesis in which they absorb sunlight through, and it was just like upstairs to second grade reading from that point on. Well, yeah, I mean, the Flash just fought the Floronic Man, and he's all about that. And I would get my Flash facts, not just the reading stuff, but I would get the science from the Flash.
Julie always kept a series of science books in his office so that when he was plotting Green Lantern or Flash or Hawkman or whatever, they could, at their fingertips, look stuff up because obviously in the 60s and 70s, pre-internet.
Yeah, absolutely. You actually had to do real research and turn some pages. And it wasn't just like, basic science, like this is how plants work. I mean, they're introducing the Einstein-Rosen-Podolsky bridge of multiple universes to people at this low age. I'm like, yeah, and by the way, if you find any antimatter out on the playground, don't touch it because you explode the universe. I knew these things. But yeah, the flashbacks were great, and you could see how he would apply them to the story. Chapter 3, the Cosmic Treadmill, how he got around in time and space. The Flash Museum was another great one. And then I'm sure this chapter had to absolutely drive you crazy to try to winnow it down. The Rogues.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a couple of my choices, there was no film available to provide to the publisher. So, because DC sent digital files, and some of the Golden Age stuff just wasn't available. So I had to come up with alternatives.
And again, I think the Flash has the most colorful rogues gallery, even more than Batman. Batman was psychotics.
Growing up, to me, the rogues were colorful and interesting, but as it moved on, especially when Cary Bates was writing the character in the 1970s, there was a genuine respect between the rogues and the Flash. There was a genuine, gentleman's agreement. As much as mayhem as they will cause, they will not kill. Captain Cold later, codified that. If you're going to be a rogue, you don't do that. And then they would say, the Flash is ours. You go away. Really made it interesting. And the camaraderie between them, as opposed to the rivalries that we saw amongst Batman's villains, there was something very, very unique about the rogues, and it just happened organically, which made it really interesting.
I mean, they did want to kill him for a while, particularly Eobard Thawne, as always.
He was never a rogue. He was never part of the group.
And I wish I could have shown. I actually have that first appearance comic book in a frame behind museum glass upstairs, hanging up on the wall, next to my first Batgirl and my Green Lantern 40.
Yeah, and I thought it was real interesting when Bill Loebs took over Flash from Mike Baron, where Wally actually reaches détente with the Rogues. They were Barry's villains, not his.
Yeah. It's like, if you guys commit a crime, he's probably I'm still gonna be here to stop you, but we don't have to have this, you trying to kill me, or you planning specifically for me at everything you do, and I won't be constantly on the lookout for you either.
Right.
It was a very interesting dynamic. They screwed it up on the show, among many other things they did, where everybody learned Barry's identity. So as soon as rogues know who the hero is, really messes things up, compromises them.
It's interesting if one learns it, but yes, Barry's actually secret identities on the CW shows are terrible.
Yeah,
they're really bad at keeping them.
Stargirl didn't even keep it, so it was, and it makes a little bit of sense, I guess, except in the case of the Flash, because when you look at the characters in costume, you know who that is in a costume. It's like, oh, look, that's Breck Basinger in a costume. There's no disguise from me. Grant Gustin's probably got the best facial covering all the time, and every time he stops a villain and he's taking a jail, it's like, yes, we got you now. Like, why did you do that?
And that's the difference between comic books and movies and television, where they want you to see the actor, and the actor feels his face needs to be seen. I recently rewatched Endgame, and I was just amazed at how often the moment they show up on screen, they're immediately taking their mask off or helmet off because they, to see the actors.
Yeah, Spider-Man all the time as well, and he had the full face mask coming off.
Oh yeah.
Last chapter was the Speed Force. What? I agree. It was a moment. It was a turning point in Flash history. Even as much as I despise the concept of it, but what drove you to choose the Speed Force as being one of the areas that you wanted to focus on Flash?
It allowed me to do a section on the Speed Force itself. Saboteur is a specific villain to the Speed Force, and the future, and it let me touch on Flashpoint, which is personally one of the stories I think never should have been told, and it wasn't told well, in my opinion.
Sure.
And I'm really tired that they've animated it. It's becoming the basis of the Flash solo film. It's like, enough. It's not a good story. Go away.
Yeah, it's they can't kill Nora Allen enough these days.
But if it's undoing Nora's death is one ripple in the pond, the rest of the events around the DC world make no sense. Why are Amazons and Atlantis fighting each other because Nora's dead?
Yeah. Well,
so to me, it's not a well thought out alternate reality.
It's not. I mean, granted, it's trying to play with that Ray Bradbury, A Sound of Thunder kind of story, where you kill a butterfly, you get a different president. But
yeah,
but over 1 million years, you can see that okay, something didn't eat this, it didn't make it didn't generate generations of bugs, famine over here. 20 years isn't going to have that same impact, chronally speaking.
Yeah,
television shows like, okay, so why did John have a girl instead of a boy, or vice versa?
The Speed Force is an interesting concept, and I'm okay with it, and I respect you for not liking it, but it's something Mark introduced in the Flash comics that has stayed and therefore needs to be acknowledged because it's been around for over 20 years now.
Yeah, you couldn't do the book without acknowledging the Speed Force and some of the stories that have come out of it. It's just, I like my superheroes to be unique with their powers. Superman's the last son of Krypton. The Flash is a guy who got chemicals and lightning dumped on him. So as soon as there's like a Speed Force, then I'm like, well, then anybody can tap into it and figure out how it works, and we have more than one Flash.
See, to me, I thought the Speed Force was a really neat way to explain all the speedsters: Jay Garrick, Wally West, Jesse Quick, Johnny Quick, and so on.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing about the Flash is that we talk about the Bat family and the Super family.
Mm-hmm.
The Flash, they don't have a Flash family, but there really are more speedsters running around than Kryptonians or Gotham City vigilantes.
And I actually thought the reboot Flash, when everyone in Central City became a speedster, was overdoing it.
Yeah.
Flash Barry Allen is supposed to be unique, and when you've got a city full of speedsters, less unique.
Yeah, it was. I guess it started with the kid sidekick. You get Kid Flash, and then of course you had to have the opposite number Flash. 3. You could live with 3. Jay's on another world entirely. That's okay. Yeah. But you get super speed and you get super speed. Pretty soon you have to quit calling yourself the Flash. It's
yeah. When Len Wein, Marv Wolfman, George Perez, and I were working on the Crisis in Infinite Earths, when we were collapsing the universes together, and there was going to be a Flash, and it was going to be Wally West, and Jay was in limbo, and Barry was dead. We thought that was going to be it. We figured Johnny Quick wasn't going to be around anymore, and he was going to be the speedster. Didn't last long.
No, it didn't. And as I recall, I'm trying to remember if it was actually written into Crisis or it was Wally West, the first appearance after Crisis, the whole I can run the speed of sound business.
Yeah, that limitation was given to him on the last pages of Crisis number 12, because they were trying to actually scale back some of the really powerful characters to make them a little more challenging. And it was great when Mike Barron came in to write The Flash for Mike Gold, because he found an entirely fresh way of looking at it. The need to eat, the metabolism, the need for money, therefore, to, buy all those pizzas.
Yeah.
So, he brought a whole new look at it.
Yeah, and I did like that. And they used that in the first television show, and they mentioned it in the second television show, but it only ever gets like a mention. They're more interested in the fact that Barry can't get drunk because he metabolizes alcohol too quickly.
Really helped that the 1990 Flash TV show had John Moore and Howard Chaykin on the writing staff, because they knew the comics and they were able to bring some of that thinking to that Barry Allen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the 90s show was great. I think the only thing that held the 90s show back was that it didn't have the technology that we have in the 2010s.
It was cutting edge for the day for television.
Absolutely.
Most expensive show on CBS, and would have gotten a second season had they not changed the programming executives, who just wasn't a fan of it.
So that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about the moments. When you pick 100 moments of The Flash, they had to be something that happened in the comic book? So like
that was an editorial. It was an editorial decision I made in consultation. I proposed this to Chartwell Books as well as DC, basically saying this has to be the source material, and it's got to be the core DC Universe source material. If we want to refer to the Elseworlds and the other stuff, that's fine. But if you start bringing in great moments from the animated shows or live action or feature films, that really was going to muddy the water in the message and became even tougher to explain.
Yeah.
So nobody argued. So I was fine with that.
I could see not taking moments from the shows or the animation. I was speaking more to the point of the fact that there was a show as a moment. Like, hey, Flash got on television. That's a moment.
Well, this is supposed to be the character's history as opposed to a history of the character. So we're able to do something like those Les Daniels books on Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman that came out for their anniversaries about 25 years ago. Then, yes, you talk about the Flash in the world's greatest superheroes comic strip and the Flash on Super Friends and that sort of stuff. That wasn't this sort of book. I alluded to a lot of that in my introductory chapter, but after that, it was all about the Flash and his, experiences.
All right. So when you're going through and culling all these experiences from history, did you have any that you knew right away skipping past the obvious, which are first appearances, did you have any that you said, yeah, that is going to be a moment in here? That will be my hill I die on to get that moment.
Well, obviously it's marrying Iris. It's his death. It's Wally picking up the mantle. The whole trial had to be acknowledged given how long it ran. So there were definitely other moments beyond that. Some of the great Rogue moments were not their introductions, like when the Rogues ganged up and killed one of their own for violating the rules.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, some speak for themselves.
There's again, I've been reading Flash for almost all my life. I've told you that story. Sometimes he's very inconsistent. I guess that's always depending on who's writing the character. One of the things that I picked up on, and this was a sort of a Green Arrow story. You remember when Green Arrow killed Prometheus?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the story right after that in the Green Arrow books was Hal, Dinah, and Flash chased down Green Arrow, and they had, the three of them were there talking to him. And this is Barry Allen having returned from, Rebirth and everything at this point. And he's just, the way he's talking to Green Arrow, he's like, I never understood why Hal liked you. You've always been this and that. And it struck me because I went back to the murder of Eobard Thawne. at the end of the Flash. And I call it murder because I'm like, when you think that fast, there's no such thing as an unpremeditated action.
Sure.
You know, and he had to stand trial in front of the Justice League, while he was on trial in actual courts.
Right.
They took a vote, and there were 6-4 and 6 against, 6 thumbs up. And I'm like, that thumb up is wearing a green glove and holding a bow and arrow. So when this happened, exactly the same thing to you, he was on your side. And now you're being a jerk to him because he did the exact same thing.
It's different writers in different times. And if you really want to split hairs here, one was a pre-crisis vote, the other was a post-crisis vote. Oh, yeah.
This is true. I live in a pre-crisis world sometimes, Bob.
I know the feeling.
I'm one of the people who was like, I felt I understood, make it simpler for everybody. But at the time I was like, we're smart enough to figure it out. And it took them 40 years to reintroduce a multiverse.
Well, Jeanette Kahn as the publisher, she was reaching this conclusion in 1982. She had been there for 6 years. And at that point, to her, when sales was struggling, in some ways the company was fighting for its life, she said maybe the parallel worlds are a barrier to new readers understanding what's going on. And she was the publisher, and she was making a decision when Marv came to her and said, I've got this idea. That became Crisis.
Yeah.
So this met one of her needs as the publisher, for good or for ill.
Well, again, you got to do what the boss says. And Jeanette ran one of the more successful eras of DC publishing in my mind. So she knew what she was doing.
She knew what she was doing. It took her a few years to get involved, to really understand how it all works, get the talent, get to know the market. And the market was changing under her while all this was happening. But Jeanette with Paul Levitz and then Joe Orlando and then Dick Giordano made the place a haven for creators. And there was a lot of groundwork being laid. But when you get Camelot 3000 and Ronin and Watchmen and Chaykin Shadow all in about 3 years, it's a whole other place.
Yeah. It was it's a personal opinion of mine, but at the time you could tell that DC Comics was being run by people who loved comics.
Oh yes, there's absolutely no arguing with that. Whereas at Marvel, Jim Shooter loved comics, Jim Galton loved numbers, and that was the way of the world until the early 80s when Galton left. And then other executives came in who loved comics. And unfortunately, they were getting there as Shooter was starting to lose his grip on the creative community.
So do you, on the face of it, this looks like a dream kind of job. I get to sit around for a year and read Flash comics.
Didn't have a year to read Flash comics. I could double check the dates, but I'm pretty certain spring 2019 was when I was pulling the list together. And once we approved the list, finding the art and telling them where to find the digital files. And then I wrote it in June and July of 2019. Part of it was on a road trip with my wife who was traveling for business. And it was supposed to, given the book production process, it was supposed to actually be out for Father's Day this year, but because COVID affected all the printers overseas, it got bumped in season as they're, so came out now here in the fall. So I did not have the ability to update it. So I had to stop at Flash Year One, which came out last summer. So I'm missing a whole year of the Josh Williamson run that would have been interesting to include.
Yeah. Now, you're right. The Flash Year One wasn't in here because, of course.
No, it's there. There's like a from the first issue or two.
Yeah. But I know I couldn't, maybe I read over it, but I didn't see Flash Rebirth in here, which was really sort of a.
I think we touched on Rebirth, certainly, because they do have Flash Year One. I guess there were definitely a couple of moments from there, because in the Rogues, I've got the Renegades from the 25th Century, which is Rebirth time. And Flash and Rogues defeating Gorilla Grodd is from that time.
I should be more specific. Yes, DC had that whole rebirth, and then they had Flash Rebirth. I'm talking specifically about the Jeff Johns, Ethan Van Sciver 6-issue miniseries that brought him back from the dead and back into the DC canon.
I may not have a moment from that miniseries. I think you may be right.
But you are correct that yes, the whole Rebirth as an overarching DC event, yeah, that was definitely covered in here, and a lot of great moments from that. We talked before we went on here about some of the moments that you thought about putting in and then didn't make the cut. Can you brief us on some of those? A
couple of the moments that I had here when Barry learns Iris is from the future. It was a significant moment for him. I was thinking about the first time Jay Garrick and the Thinker fought, but we didn't have film, so that had to come off the list. When Hunter Zollerman becomes Zoom. I would have done Captain Boomerang as a member of the Suicide Squad. Since I was editing the book at the time, that I thought, that would be fun. First time Jay Garrick fought the Shade back in the Golden Age, but unfortunately there was no film for that. In the 25th century, Iris West kills Professor Zoom, again from one of the Rebirth issues.
He gets killed a lot too.
Yeah, they all get better. There was a fun one from 1972 that Flash thinks he's an 8-year-old. That was a fun moment.
I have not seen that one. I've seen him being turned into like a super toddler.
Yeah, no, this is from Flash 198, 1972. So this is post Carmine drawing the book, early Carrie Bates writing the book. I think Andrew and Esposito was still doing the art.
The Flash that was one of the fun things of the Flash that era, though, because every issue from one to the other, you didn't know what was going to happen to him. His head might swell up. He might be an obese running person.
I still contend that I mentioned this in the book, and I'll say it here. I think the run of Carmine designed and executed covers through the 1960s is probably the single most consistently entertaining run of covers from the Silver Age.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yes, Superman and under the Mort Weisinger, Jimmy and Lois and World's Finest, they all had their interesting transformations and gimmicky covers. But the stop, that great hand of, out there and people walking over the Flash's dead body, Grodd holding the empty suit. There's just such brilliant covers. And the Infantino Anderson art is just so stunning.
Yeah, I love Infantino. Infantino is the only person who's ever drawn a future that looked like one I wanted to live long enough to
I give him credit. In the 1950s, he had already been drawing comics for 6, 8, 10 years and went back and took art classes, picking up the style that you see first in Adam Strange before Flash, about the futuristic cities.
Right.
He really gained you can see his art grow by leaps because of those lessons.
Now, you mentioned that some things couldn't be considered because you didn't have the film for it, the pictures. Was researching the pictures used in here your responsibility?
Yes, I had to come up. Once I had the moments, I then had to scour the web to find whatever screenshots I could to give them a cue for what to include and where, to make sure what I was describing was actually what they should be getting filmed for. And every now and then the digital files would come from DC, and this wonderful, patient woman named Leanne Moreau would carefully put together like galleys and said, all right, I think it's these moments. These are based on your charts. Confirm before they actually send everything to the designer. And every now and then, either I made a mistake or the film came in wrong. And between me and Leanne, we got it all straightened out, and our designers just really, came through.
So that was going to be my next question, was that, you wrote the manuscript, and you told them what pictures to use and sent them the example, but you didn't have to get involved in actually formatting the page and putting the...
No. There was a designer on the Justice League book who created the template for the look of the 100 greatest moments, and DC, between DC and Chartwell, they had some idea of the ratio of art to text. I was right. They were wanting 35,000 word manuscripts. I was writing between 35 and 40. They said, well, skew closer to 30 because we want to make sure there's plenty of room for art. So we wound up in the 33 to 35 range by the time you added in the captions and credits.
I was going to ask if the word count actually included the captions, because each chapter does have its own. There's real writing in here. It's not just your coffee table, turn the page and look at the picture each time. And again, God, such great art here. I remember when the top died. That was a big thing.
Oh, sure.
That
was another one that didn't make the cut.
I didn't even think about that not making the cut.
Rogues to go.
And because when he died, his ghost kept showing up, tormenting the Flash.
Yeah, messing around with the Golden Glider.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I remember when she showed up too. I was like, I don't know what it was about the Golden Glider, but something turned when she was around. The Flash became like a superhero soap opera all of a sudden, and
that's what Carrie was doing. There was a run there. Heatwave learns his identity and is involved in that, and then once basically Iris died, and before the trial really got underway, and Barry was Daphne, almost marrying Daphne Dean. Yes, I mean, Carrie was really riffing on soap opera elements here.
Yeah, and Daphne Dean, I thought it was Fiona Webb.
Fiona Webb, forgive me, Daphne Dean, previous girlfriend. Thank you.
I knew that she was a girlfriend. I was like, did I get my...
No, he nearly married Fiona Webb. Fiona nearly died. And she is one of the few who actually has not been rebooted.
Oh, that's true. We haven't seen her.
Nope, I double-checked that.
And she, he really had to work to get her to like him, too. She did not like him at first at all.
Right.
I'm yeah.
Now,
look open because, of course, we have... This moment occurs a couple of times in the Flash's history.
Yes, but you can't leave it out.
Oh no, you can't. That's iconic. How many Flash races did you find between the Flash and Superman?
Well, it helped that I actually, when I was on staff at DC as a collected editions editor, put together the Flash versus Superman race collection, so I knew about all the stories. So there's Superman versus Jay Garrick from DC First, and Superman versus Wally West from the Adventures of Superman race, plus the original two races, the follow-up in DC Comics Presents, the World's Finest race. So yeah, I got a few there.
And they did it again. I want to say recently, which means it happened in the last 10 years.
Yes,
because again, the years compress. And I don't remember the story or why it was happening. It wasn't really like a race. It was like the Flash is running off to do something and Superman's trying to stop him. And he's like, Barry, I'm as fast as you are. We've had this. We've tried this before. And that's when Barry looks and says, that was for charity. I was holding back, and he's gone. It's just like, oh, he is really the fastest man alive now.
Sure. I remember that moment. I don't remember the issue, but I remember the moment.
And that it stuck with me because it's like, it's about damn time you showed how fast you are compared to the big blue guy.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're just I'm a subset of your powers.
Well, the first two races were ties. So when they had the World's Finest race and Barry actually won, I thought it was, DC had finally decided to stop being wishy-washy about it.
Yeah, there's they were tying on purpose, weren't they? Or he won to throw.
That was the first race.
Yeah,
from Superman 199. Yeah,
and then he beat Superman, and then he thought Superman held back on him to trick Mixus Pitalik. Thank you, Bob Rozakis. I know how to say the name. Answer Man columns were my bread and butter back in the day. I was poring over these things because you never know when I'm going to be on Jeopardy.
He's the man.
He was the answer man. So even though Superman was saying, oh no, Wally, this was all you, I'm sweating bullets here. You still had that kind of maybe Superman held back a little bit, but once Barry took off, it was like, yeah, that was good. Kid Flash has always been one of my favorites. You've got, of course, the founding of the new Teen Titans in here, which on the face of it doesn't maybe look like it would be a Flash moment, but because Wally was such a seminal character to that founding of the team.
Well, it's interesting because Marv didn't want to keep him there for long. He really didn't want a character who could solve the problem for the team in a second. But they found ways to make him interesting and not use the speed as a crutch. So he stayed there for much longer than Marv originally intended. So we needed to acknowledge that.
Well, he was always one of my favorites in the and I don't know if that it is covered in here. I saw it. The original Teen Titans when it was the Robin Aqualad Kid Flash team up.
Absolutely.
Which I owned at one point in my life. At one point in my life, I said, I'm going to own every appearance of every Teen Titan. And then someone pointed out to me that, so you're going to go get that first Speedy appearance from More Fun Comics #1, which in the 1980s was already the price of a house.
More Fun number 73 to be exact.
Well, thank you. I knew it was More Fun. That was it.
Well, that would also mean all the Robin appearances.
Which is pretty much a full Batman run after a certain point.
Yeah, plus his solo appearances in Star Spangled. So, that would have been an expensive hobby.
Very expensive hobby. So I narrowed it down to, just the Teen Titans appearances. I had some Brave and Bold issues.
And that was a lot easier. They actually didn't guest star a lot as the team other than World's Finest and Brave and Bold.
This is true. And whenever they did, it was always interesting because they were there to be the voice of rebel youth. And, it'd be like Robin telling the team, don't let up on him. Kick Batman's butt. Teach him a lesson.
The interesting thing, writing the teen book at a time when the generation gap was really widening in the late 60s and changed the tenor of relations in the early 70s. That was a tough book to write. And I give Dick Giordano and Steve Skates some props with Robert Kanigher, when Dick took over the Titans and they lost their costume, gave up their costumes, and the Mr. Jupiter era began.
Yeah.
They were trying to go and explore some of those social issues.
It was so almost a parallel to the Wonder Woman giving up her costume and identity.
Same era, you bet.
Yeah, same era. Bob Kanigher, he drew. I think it's him. He drew one of my favorite Flash covers because it was so.
No,
gritty.
Kanigher never drew.
Okay, then never mind. Maybe he wrote it, but
you thinking of Kubert?
Kubert, yeah, thank you. It's the one where Flash is on the hospital bed and the doctor's telling him he's never going to run again, and you see
yeah,
rolling up foot, and it was just so. It's like that's gross. I can't stop looking at it.
Yeah, the Flash 180s, 190s. I don't remember the exact issue number, but blue and white cover. I remember it well.
Yes. So you've got one more of these that you're contracted for. Hopefully that means there'll be another contract if these are selling well enough with fans.
I would either that or something else exploring the DC history. I
would love. I know they've done the history of the DC universe 2-volume compendium, but I think that a larger series would really be needed to explore that.
Well, with the John Ridley alternate history of the DC universe from the perspective, I guess, of the minorities and the underprivileged.
That's the new one.
5-issue prestige series is about to launch this month. I don't know how that's going to play with the history, and I don't know if a publisher who's not DC would want a book like that. It can be done.
Yeah,
no about it.
But that's the stuff that I always got into the Who's Who. I loved the Who's Who up until the point when they made them 3-ring binder pages.
That was an attempt to freshen the concept. I will say that DC Comics is collecting all of these. Finally, they're doing an omnibus book. Yep, I've got those.
I love these things. An omnibus book of the Who's Who would be fantastic.
It's all 26 issues, the Who's Who 87 and 88 updates, all the loose leaf pages, all the pages that were from the 1989 annuals, all in one big fat book.
That'll be great. I mean, I know they do DK books.
And I just wrote the intro for that, so I know it's a real deal.
That I'm going to be looking for that then. I'd love to see an updated one. But two things about that is I know that DK is doing these kind of books all the time. They don't seem to have all the same presentation of the information that the Who's Who did, because the Who's
no, because DK's approach is a different one that's of less. Some of those details are of less important to a mass reader than a comic fan.
Right.
So, it's for different audiences. And, a lot of the stuff I do in the 100 Greatest Moments books is trying to boil it all down so that somebody picking this up at a Barnes & Noble who may not be a regular reader of the comics can understand why there are so many variations.
Makes sense. Yeah. Put it in the into the non-fan perspective.
Absolutely. Writing for your audience is important, especially with a book like a series of things like this. It helps that I know the stuff cold, so I know how to, cut away, as opposed to hiring a writer to come in and try and understand it.
Yes. I think the other issue that I could see as an impediment to another Who's Who kind of book from DC is that, and again, cynical old man in a fan's body coming out again, is that by the time they get halfway through a Who's Who series, it's all different for the people they've already published. Things have, I still can't quite figure out what happened to Superman with the New 52 and everything.
Well, that's easy.
Okay.
The New 52 Superman was met with resounding thud, and editorial had a tap dance fast. And when Convergence gave us the pre New 52 Superman as an option, they grabbed him, Lois, and the kid, and killed off the New 52 Superman, which is why Bendis has got running in his books now, people saying, I've got proof that's not the real Lois Lane.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, Lois had to go too. I can't follow it because I know I sound boycotting the Bendis writing, because I'm not doing that. But I have a real bee in my bonnet about John Kent.
Okay.
Because the Super Sons was just selling really well. It had a huge fan following. And then John Kent goes to space with Grandpa Jor-El and comes back as a 17-year-old. I'm like, why? You were doing so well.
To be a fly on the wall to hear the thinking, it would have been interesting. But you and I, we're just readers now.
We just read. And all I do is I look at the books. When I find a book I don't like, I put it down. I'm like, it will be different in 5 years.
I'm still reading the books every week because I don't know when I'll be writing an intro for DC or, a book like the 100 Greatest Moments. I'm also doing some consulting with their international department, so I need to stay current.
Sure. Absolutely you do. Can you tell us what the next 100 Greatest Moments book is?
No, I can't.
It's
not been contracted. It's not on the schedule. I mean, we've talked about it. It was supposed to be one character, and I was contracted for that. And then the sales office told Chartwell, no, can't be that. It should be this. And they had to redo the contract, and then COVID, and then now there are delays. So until I'm contracted, I can't really talk about what it is. But because I knew what it was, I've already got 90% of my 100 moments already spec'd out, and I've already pulled art and made lists. And so whenever they're ready to contract, I'm good to go.
Okay, so they contracted for 3 books, but they didn't say what the specific books were going
Well, it was originally going to be Batman, Flash, and this other character. That's what I signed originally. But when they changed the other character to a different other character, the contract had to be amended, and that's just held up right now. Gotcha.
Well, let them know that there's a Teen Titans fan out there that would love to get the 100 greatest moments of that.
Titans would be great. Some of it has to do with what's going to be coming out as a feature film, what might be still on CW or HBO Max, so that they've got a sales hook for the mass market. So, looking at what's coming up to HBO Max, Green Lantern would be a great option.
Yeah, I could see that definitely coming up. The HBO Max one is a weird one too. Again, just speaking as a fan, Yes, HBO Max is doing a Green Lantern series. They can treat it like a real police CSI show in space. And they're like, we're going to focus on one. That's fine. You've got so many to pick from. It's not going to be any of those. Where's the hook?
I will hold judgment till I watch it.
I do the same
things
thing.
Change.
Yes. I didn't think that Doom Patrol could be pulled off as a television show. And now I'm like, why didn't this get an Emmy?
The editor of the Doom Patrol in me, because I'm the one who put Grant Morrison and Richard Case on that series. Seeing Crazy Jane, seeing that incarnation of Robot Man and Larry Trainer, it's like, oh my gosh, Crazy Jane, and now Dorothy Spinner is like, every time a new episode comes out, Richard Case and I sort of geeble back and forth on Facebook about it.
I can imagine. I mean, this is your stepchildren in a way.
Sure.
You watch that, and the only thing that worries me now is that with Stargirl moving on to CW and Swamp Thing coming to CW, and I forget something's going to HBO Max. Has there been a commitment for Doom Patrol yet to go anywhere? Because it looks obviously
Doom Patrol second season was HBO Max and the DC Universe streaming service. There will be a third season of Doom Patrol, and that is HBO Max only because DC is stopping the original streaming on the DC Universe, and they've rebranded it as DC Infinity, I think.
Yeah. I was glad to see those kind of things come around because I'm an IT guy, internet work. I was talking 15 years ago. I was like, you know what? Instead of finding what channel your show is going to be on, I bet there'll be just like an internet channel that caters to a genre, like the sci-fi genre, and it'll be more direct. It'll be like, we only show the superhero stuff. And they're like, no one's going to do that. Here we are doing it.
Yeah. I thought the Swamp Thing show had real potential. I don't know what prompted it to be cut from 13 to 10 episodes. The fact that it's wildly successful in the primetime ratings for the CW is a nice vindication for the creative teams there. I don't know if there's any talk of doing more with it. It'd be nice.
Well, they're moving it over to CW for that first season run again. Maybe that cliffhanger ending just begs to come back and do more.
Got me.
While we're closing shop up here,
okay.
I do want to let folks know that you had a Kickstarter out here, and I'm putting the chat link.
As a freelance writer and editor, I'm part of a group known as Crazy 8 Press, where we are basically publishing what we want to publish. And 2 years ago, I did my tribute to the golden age of pulp magazines with Thrilling Adventure Yarns. So everybody wrote pulp-style stories across the genres. And they did really well, and we're doing a second volume. As you can see, there are 6 days left. And I am past goals, so I'm into the stretch goals now. And for comic fans, we just hit the stretch goal today that lets me buy a story from Stuart Moore. And if I get to 7,500, I get a story from Ron Mars, who doesn't write a lot of prose these days. And I've got more stretch goals coming up. Richard Pace, the artist, will do a Kickstarter exclusive cover if I get to that ultimate 12,000 goal. With 6 days to go, who knows where we'll wind up.
These things sometimes have a tendency of spiking right at the very last day. So you could get
the last handful of days tend to be when things spike. Last time I was floored by the velocity over the course of 30 days. This time around, it's a more traditional lull in the second and third week. And here we are in the final week, and we'll see where we go. Yeah,
Kickstarter especially spikes on the last day because I back a lot of crowdfunded stuff. I'll go to Indiegogo and I'll go to Kickstarter, and I like them both. But as a customer, I prefer Indiegogo.
Right.
Because when I give Indiegogo money, they take my money.
Right.
My PayPal card. When I give Kickstarter money, I'll look in my PayPal a month and a half later and say, oh, I have some money for this thing I want to do. And then I'll spend it and they'll take my money. And then Kickstarter comes and tries to take it on that last day and says, hey, we don't have any money in here. I'm like, why didn't you take it when I gave it to you?
It's an all or nothing. That's the business model. And it seems to be working.
So I don't have any now because I've got all my Kickstarters taken care of. but my big monitor here has sticky notes all over. It says, you must have X number of dollars in PayPal on this day. So I watch them come out now.
At least you budget for it. That's a very wise move.
I just don't want I don't get a bounce charge or anything, but I don't want the funder to. It would be my bounce that would cause them to fall under funding on the day of fulfillment. So I would
most campaigns have to factor in maybe 5% for people's credit card being declined or whatever. It's just the nature of the business.
Yep. Well, Bob, I appreciate you being on here talking with us about the Flash.
No, this is fun, RJ.
It has. Well, I love talking with people who know comics history because it's like sitting around the comic shop and just talking about your favorite characters. And
I miss being able to do that.
I do too. My local comic shop is finally open again, so I get to sit around there. It's a comic boutique kind of experience. They have a big TV and a coffee shop and comic books. And yeah, but when I was in college, it was like sitting around having serious discussions.
Sure.
About how Superman's powers work. And whether or not, you could cut Wolverine in half and grow 2 Wolverines.
Well, sure.
Maybe you could. But that's a topic for another time. I'm going to let you go. And again, I appreciate it. When the next book is contracted, hopefully we can sit down and jaw about that for a little while.
Happy to, come back and talk anytime you want, RJ.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob. Everyone in the chat here. The link to the book on Amazon is in the description below. Click that and pick it up. This is something you're going to enjoy.